I did this video like 8 months ago, but whatever, who's counting? I'm finally doing the thing I said. The October 4th school flood incident, iCarly game definitive lore part 2. Trigger warning, death, murder, natural disaster, MCI mass casualty incident. As a reminder, this is a review on Common Sense Media. Disclaimer, this document is made under the jurisdiction of the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation. This document does not discuss the immortality method developed by Organization Name, and rather recounts our investigation into an incident with particular ties to the group. The February 3rd iCarly standoff incident, we had presumed, was the end to the saga of Redacted and Organization Name. All involved were either deceased or incarcerated, and we had every reason to believe this series of tragedies had come to an end. That was until October 4th, 2023, in which a bizarre disaster in a small town would prove that this investigation had only just begun in town name, state name, at approximately 9:03 a.m. An internal message was sent over the school custodian radio station, which had alerted the team of a code red. What the fuck does this have to do with iCarly? Upon investigation of the school custodian handbook, this was the highest of a 5-tiered rating system, whose description read as follows. Code Red is reserved for electrical, water, or gas-related malfunctions which pose imminent threat to all persons inside the school. All custodians should leave their posts and begin working on the Code Red issue immediately. Alongside the Code Red was the location of the 220's hallway boys' bathroom, which will be disproven as the primary source of the flood later on. However, there was a secondary water source in that bathroom, so the custodians spent their time in vain trying to repair this leak. After roughly 15 minutes of failing to repair this leak, at 9:18 a.m. the custodians report to the principal of the school that a relocation of the students and staff within the vicinity of the leak is advised. By this point, roughly 3 inches of toilet water had accumulated at the 220's hallway and was spilling down the stairs into the 120's hallway below. How the fuck does that work? It's just, there's no way, the water would just be, they would just shut off the water. That's what they do. By 9:30 a.m., the water in the 120's and the 220's had risen to 6 inches. This meant that the custodians could no longer detect the source of the leak in the bathroom due to the source being below the surface of the water. Teachers and other faculty assist the custodians in trying to construct a barricade in the 2 hallways with desks and tables to prevent the water from spilling into the hallways nearby. However, these barricades are not watertight, meaning they did little to prevent the ensuing flood. At this point, students and staff had attempted to contact the town name, state name fire department, but their calls were not going through. In subsequent investigations, it had become apparent that these calls were not going through for one or a combination of 3 reasons. Firstly, the phone lines had been disconnected from the school manually. This was one of the indications to the FBI that foul play had been involved with the incident. Secondly, the Wi-Fi was no longer working. Whether this was intentional or a byproduct of the water damage is presently unknown. Regardless, this, in addition to the cell signal blocker put in place by the school administration, meant that students and faculty were unable to communicate to the outside world via phone calls, text messages, and Discord messages, among other means of e-communication. Thirdly, every single member of the fire department was on call to fight a raging fire at the town name, state name dump. Note that this faculty has previously been under the investigation of the FBI due to connections of the actions of Redacted. What the fuck does this have to do with iCarly? I know I said this already. This is the iCarly school game incident? What the fuck? Where's the iCarly game? I think, what happened is, this is supposed to be someone's, like, little story that they made throughout Common Sense Media reviews, but the others got deleted. And all that's left is this. In brief, the factory erupted into a fiery blaze around 8:47 a.m., at which the town fire department quickly rushed to the scene due to the violent and rapidly growing nature of the fire. Within an hour following the outbreak of the fire, every single member of the town's fire department was inside the building combating the inferno, when suddenly a large explosion from the... Hold on. I thought it was at the dump. I know... Honestly, at first I thought this might have been AI slap, but it just doesn't make it makes less sense if you think of it that way, because I don't know, this just doesn't read like AI slap to me. I think this kind of reads like someone who really likes SCP shit and tried to make one of their own on fucking Common Sense Media reviews. Within an hour following the outbreak of the fire, every single member of the town fire department was inside the building combating the inferno, when suddenly a large explosion from the facility's basement destroyed the building and everyone inside. A new investigation is underway regarding this disaster, but the only finding of note so far has been that there was an increased pressure of radiation in and around the rubble of the facility. Looking back at the school, by 9:45 a.m., the water accumulation in the 120s and 220s had risen to 18 inches, displaying an exponential growth of water release. Beyond the water pipes bursting, the sewage pipes had also burst, releasing untreated sewage throughout the school. All the while, water was rapidly flowing into the surrounding areas of the two hallways, including the school library, gymnasium, and guidance office. The majority of students and faculty had been moved to the cafeteria and auditorium, and once there, the principal put into place a stay-in-place order. This decision likely sealed the fate of everyone inside the school. By 10 a.m., the water and sewage level had risen to 48 inches in places surrounding the source of the flood. Note that the rate of the water level rising has been found using carbon-12 dating on the school walls. That's not how that fucking works. Carbon dating is for fossils and shit. You can't do that. Man, I sound like fucking CinemaSins, but I don't even know what to make of this fucking Common Sense Media iCarly story. At this point, 75% of the school had been moved into the auditorium and cafeteria. The other 25% in the building was composed of renegade teachers who had decided to barricade themselves and their students in their own classrooms, as well as those who had already become deceased. In order to keep the students and other staff calm, a group of staff in the cafeteria began hosting a Fortnite dance-off for the perturbed students. Meanwhile, in the auditorium, the teachers had begun playing Mr. Beast videos on the projector. This information became available to investigators by looking at the students' notes app as well as unsent text messages. This is me in editing. Sorry the audio sounded weird throughout this whole video. I'm a hack who doesn't know anything. Second of all, they've just kept it straight that there's no internet, so how the fuck were they playing Mr. Beast videos? I mean, did they just have that shit downloaded? What teacher downloads Mr. Beast videos? At 10:13 a.m., water reached the ceilings of the 110s and 220s hallways. How fucking longer is this? Oh my god! A few rebellious groups of students had begun investigating the area and noted the presence of jellyfish and coral in the sewage-ridden floodwater. Additionally, the wiring and outlets exposed to the rising water released high-voltage electrical currents into those that came in contact with the water. This was fatal for the aforementioned group of students. Increased levels of panic spread throughout the cafeteria and auditorium, with students now begging teachers to let them leave. The staff, in futile attempts to calm the students, began playing games, but this only served to further unnerve students. One digitized retelling recounts how two teachers by the names of Teacher Name 1 and Teacher Name 2 tried to put on a game of Heads Up 7-Up, in which teachers put their heads down onto the lunch table, put their thumbs up, and try to get... That's just... Why are you just describing how Heads Up 7-Up works? However, the game quickly devolved into chaos as the picking student began slapping the shit out of students with the head down. A large-scale brawl began with students hurling profanities and punches at their fellow peers. At the same time, students began raiding the storage of the cafeteria and attacking the lunch ladies. Upon finding a trove of calzones, students began fighting over the limited supply, and despite the calzones still being frozen, many began gnawing on the ice-covered delicacies. In the auditorium, the Mr. Beast video $456,000 Squid Game in real life had prompted the students to begin playing their own Squid Game against the teacher's will. Particularly, they played the red light, green light. where one student stood on the stage and said the titular phrase. Whenever one student was caught moving at the wrong time, the collective student body would gang up and pummel that student to death. What the fuck? Though these casualties would only make up a small portion of the total 1,455, by 10:20 a.m., the principal begrudgingly decides to end the school day and orders the evacuation of the school. However, the two safeguards which would facilitate this decision abruptly fail, causing disaster. Firstly, the principal orders the custodians to cut off water to the school. Although this is typically done through the fire department, as mentioned before, they could not reach the town name, state name fire department. I don't know if that's how that works. That could be accurate. Guessing how the rest of the story has been going, probably not. Therefore, the principal sends a team of custodians to cut off the water via a manual school-wide spigot located in the basement of the school. However, as the custodians, trudging through feet of hallway water, opened the basement door, they found out the entire basement had flooded with water and sewage. Selflessly, they decided to dive into the water and attempt to swim to the spigot. However, it proved too far, and the team of 7 drowned in the basement. Secondly, and quite possibly the most catastrophic event of the day, the exterior door system failed. Looking at the blueprints of the school, one can see that all doors to the outside world are mechanically locked during the school day. Typically, this prevents people outside from entering the school without ringing the doorbell, though the system can be made to impede students from opening the exterior doors from the outside of the school during the school day. The principal, alongside a few teachers, left the auditorium and trudged through the now 36-inch high water to get to the main office, where the exterior doors could all be unlocked. However, upon getting to the system, they found that the programming of the system had been overridden by an exterior party, locking all doors from the outside. This meant that nobody could leave the school, but this did not deter the principal and the other students from trying to get into the mainframe. In the midst of their attempts, waist-deep in water, another electrical short spark occurred, sending deadly volts into the office water and killing the group. By this point in time, people in the outside world had begun taking notice of the ensuing disaster, and a small crowd had gathered around the school. They are unable to open the doors due to the system override and cannot break the reinforced glass windows. These windows, in accordance with state name law, are sealed shut, meaning that there is no possible way for anyone to exit the building. At approximately 10:31 a.m., a sudden foundational shift occurs in the school. The hundreds of tons of water now occupying many of the hallways and classrooms opens a sinkhole beneath a portion of the school and causes the school to shift at an 86-degree 11-inch angle towards the northwest. Rapidly, a series of ceiling-high waves rush throughout the school, impacting all remaining holdouts. The first to be overtaken is the auditorium. Although the large double doors had previously been able to hold back the flood, at 10:32 a.m., they are flung open by the surge of water now rapidly filling up the room. In spite of the high ceiling, the room fills to the top within minutes, resulting in the death of more than 300. At the same time, all barricaded classrooms are overtaken and flood even faster than the auditorium. Lastly, the cafeteria is breached. Although it had only previously flooded to about 12 inches due to being on the opposite side of the school compared to where the flood began, the foundational shift caused massive tsunami-esque waves to destroy the cafeteria, flipping tables and tossing students around. High levels of water, still flowing from the source of the flood, led to the entire school being filled with water, now with no air pockets left. But I thought there was a sinkhole. How did... At least some would rush out there, you know? At 10:46, massive structural failure occurs, resulting in the collapse of the western wing of the school. The roof caves in and walls crumble under the pressure of the water. This causes a domino effect throughout the rest of the building, resulting in the center structure, which includes the auditorium, main hallway, main office, and gymnasium, collapsing. Other parts of the building face structural damage, with classrooms on the outskirts of the school having their windows shoot off their frame and shatter. This, in addition to the structural collapse, releases thousands of gallons of water into the street, overturning cars and uprooting many houses. The gathering crowd is swept away, resulting in the additional deaths of more than 150 people. By 11 a.m., the dust has settled, the calamity is over. The town is violently made aware of the tragedy, and nearby towns send their fire departments to help with the recovery. Within 2 hours, FEMA has constructed a perimeter around the disaster zone and body retrieval is well underway. More than 3 dozen houses are evacuated due to structural damage, and a natural disaster camp is set up. Earlier in this recording, I would just say a line again if I messed it up, but I just want this to be done with. I've been reading this for like 20 fucking minutes. I know that's not a lot, but I didn't realize it was this long. The camp is made to provide aid for roughly 1,000 people, as FEMA underestimated the amount of survivors of the tragedy. In reality, just 120 people utilized the services, mostly those who had to leave their houses in the wake of the flood. The first FBI agents arrived at 2:30 p.m. The lead investigator, Junior Agent Marcus DePaula, began looking into the evidence surrounding the event. He discovered the evidence of foul play, phone line tampering, and exterior door system override, as well as subsequent breaks in the case. These will be discussed in detail shortly. The next day, October 5th, 2023, the day of this document's creation, mass-scale cleanup crews began clearing the rubble early in the morning. Bulldozers and trucks have begun carrying away debris from the site. Although Mr. DePaula's investigations have just begun, he has already uncovered significant evidence which has allowed our team to connect this event to redacted an organization name. The evidence includes: it is unlikely to be a coincidence that the school was the former employer for Redacted prior to him pursuing a life of crime. Primary to the initial reports from the custodians, the primary source of the floodwater was determined to be a classroom in the 220s. Mr. DePaula was able to come to the conclusion based on the fact that the piping going to the classroom was still expelling water in the rubble of the classroom. Mr. DePaula was able to come to the conclusion that, based on the fact that the piping going to the classroom was still expelling water in the rubble of the classroom was equipped with 7 sinks, an emergency shower, and an emergency iwash station, which could explain how the school flooded much faster than expected. Additionally, looking at the water distribution history, it can be seen that in addition to tampering with the phone lines and exterior door system, there was tampering with the water distribution, with half the school's water flow being directed to this one classroom. Despite being the first classroom to flood and likely the source of the disaster, the classroom never evacuated, suggesting that something had impeded the students exiting the classroom. Lastly, and possibly most notable, in addition to this being the school where Redacted once worked, this was the classroom in which he once taught. The FBI had just, 2 days prior to this tragedy, received a search warrant to investigate the classroom for the previous possessions of Redacted. Most notably, we were looking for Redacted's old computer. 6 months ago, organization names postings to the website Common Sense Media mysteriously disappeared overnight. Oh my god, it's real-life lore for why this exists. This was a key source of evidence. Now, this is fucking real lore for why the other reviews likely by this person don't exist. This was a key source of evidence for the investigations into the February 3rd iCarly standoff incident. All these posts were deleted by an admin of the site, and upon looking into the IP address of the admin's account, it matched the former computer of Redacted. This implies someone had access to his computer, which was destroyed in this incident, which originated in this classroom. Presumably, the computer was password protected, meaning it must have been someone with intimate knowledge of the computer. No suspects have matched this description so far, suggesting that the only person who could access this computer is Redacted himself. Although Redacted was presumed dead following the February 3rd iCarly standoff incident, an investigation had been opened into the possibility of him surviving. Jared Fogle, Andrew Tate, DJ Khaled, and the Virgin are being interviewed about this possibility. Signed, Christopher A. Ray, Director of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. What the fuck? You can't... Jared Fogle? So, if I'm reading this right, the person who made this review, Christopher A.W., this person is the person who apparently... Too much consumerism. So, The person who made the review is allegedly, according to the lore of this, the person that destroyed the school. Ages 2+, by the way.